Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this video, which is very specifically on AQA A-Level English Lit B, and on the first question on the tragedy paper, which is about Othello. If that is not your spec or that's not the question you're interested in, then don't watch this video. However, if it is the spec that you want to do and it is the question that you're interested in, then what I'm going to do today is take you through what you're going to be asked to do in the question and how you could craft your answer. So firstly, this is how the question will be presented on the page to you in the exam. So you've got the question at the top, you've got the extract, and then in the bottom corner you can see I've labelled the scene. Now what you'll notice is that the extracts are quite substantial, more substantial than they would be if you were doing this for GCSE. And also the scene gives you some really good information about where we are in the play, in the trajectory of the action that's happening. So this particular scene, we'll see Act 4, Scene 3, is pretty much towards the end of the play. We're in the falling action. We know that Desdemona is approaching her death. At the start of Act 4, Othello strikes Desdemona as the marriage deteriorates and he becomes more and more desperately jealous of her, and Iago takes his control. Then after this, we have Desdemona's murder and Othello's suicide later on, as well as Emilia's murder and Iago's imprisonment. So we have a kind of knowledge of where we are in the play. Now, the next thing then is to read the extract. And as we're doing this, I would have a pen in my hand or a highlighter in my hand, and I'd be going through and highlighting or picking out the key parts of this particular scene. That might be motifs that I recognise, words that I recognise, quotations that I know that I've done analysis on before, or aspects of tragedy that I think could be useful for you. Okay, so we're just going to read it. Now, normally in an exam, I would read it through twice, as I say, with that pen in my hand, so reading actively. Right, I'm not going to sing Desdemona's singing at the start. I'm not going to do that. I'll just read it. So Desdemona starts, I called my love a false love, but what said he then? Sing willow, willow, willow. If I court more women, you'll couch with more men. Then she speaks, so get thee gone, good night, my eyes do itch. Does that bode weeping? 'Tis neither here nor there. I have heard it said so, oh, these men, these men. Dost thou in conscience think, tell me, Amelia, that there be women do abuse their husbands in such gross kind? There be some such, no question. Wouldst thou do such a deed for all the world? Why, would not you? No, by this heavenly light. Nor I by this heavenly light. I might do it as well in the dark. Wouldst thou do such a deed for all the world? The world's a huge thing. It is a great price for a small vice. In truth, I think thou wouldst not. In truth, I think thou would, and undo it when I had done it. Marry, I would not do such a thing for a joint ring, nor for measures of lawn, nor for gowns, petticoats, nor caps, nor any petty exhibition. But for all the whole world? That's pity. Who would not make her husband a cuckold to make him a monarch? I should venture purgatory for it. Beshrew me if I should do such a wrong for the whole world. Why, the wrong's but a wrong in the world, and having the world for your labour, 'tis a wrong in your own world, and you might quickly make it right. I do not think there is any such woman. Yes, a dozen, and as many to the vantage would store the world they played for. But I do think it is their husbands' fault if wives do fall. Say that they slack in their duties and pour our treasures into foreign laps, or else break out in peevish jealousy, throwing restraint upon us, or say they strike us, or scant their former havings in despite. Why, we have goals, and though we have some grace, yet we have some revenge. Let husbands know their wives have some sense like them. They see and smell and have their palates both for sweet and sour as husbands have. What is it that they do when they change us for others? Is it sport? I think it is. And doth affection breed it? I think it doth. Is it frailty that thus errs? It is so too. And have we not affections, desires for sport and frailty as men have? Then let them use us well, else let them know the ills we do. Their ills instruct us so. Good night, good night. God may such uses send, not to pick bad from bad, but by bad mend. Okay, so as I say, I would be reading it twice in the exam to make sure I've got a really clear sense of what's going on in the extract. Let's turn to the question then. So here I've picked out the command words, so those words that tell you what you're going to do in the question. So read the extract below, right, we've done that, then answer the question. Explore the significance of this extract in relation to the tragedy of the play as a whole. Remember to include in your answer relevant analysis of Shakespeare's dramatic methods, and we have 25 marks. So we've done the reading already. We're going to do that really actively and quite carefully. We're not going to rush that. And then it says to explore. Now, this means to look at a range of ideas, to try things out, to try out our analysis, to delve deep into what the extract is telling us. Then we've got this reminder, because the exam board know that people often forget to do the relevant analysis. We'll look at what that means in a few minutes. But that reminder, that signal to you to make sure you analyse in your answer. It talks in the question about looking at the significance of this extract in relation to the tragedy of the play as a whole. Now, what the examiner is looking for in your essay is an interrogation, a close interrogation of the extract that you've got in front of you. They don't want you to be writing reams and reams about the rest of the play. However, we do need to situate this extract in the flow of the whole tragedy. So that might mean looking at what's immediately before this extract, what's led to the conversation that we're seeing today, and what's happened immediately after the extract, for example. Or you might be looking at a motif that you see across the whole play, or the development of a character across the whole play. But the main thing is that we are pinning all of our comments down to the extract that we have in front of us, and that we are starting with that interrogation of that extract. The questions are also asking us to think about tragedy, and there's lots of aspects of tragedy that you will have studied as part of the course, so tragic villains, tragic heroes, and so on. So bring them in as well to your answer. Then we're reminded to look at that relevant analysis of Shakespeare's dramatic methods. And I've already mentioned it's one of the command words is to remember to do this. Now, analysis can come in lots of different forms, but essentially this is how the writer uses methods to create meaning. And for Shakespeare, these are dramatic methods. So you might be commenting about the staging. We've got two women here in a private space. And even though Amelia is making what might be seen as a proto-feminist speech, actually, because she's confined in that private sphere, there's no men there, she's not making a public declaration of her beliefs. You know, you could interpret this as being quite a limited protest against her situation. So that might be part of the dramatic methods that you're looking at. You might explore the use of the Willow Song and how that builds pathos for Desdemona. You might look at the juxtaposition between how Amelia and Desdemona are presented and what that tells us about the roles of women, the changing roles of women at the time. But what we're looking for really is for you to pin your comments down to the particular methods that are being used to create those meanings in the text. The first thing we need to do is to make our plan. And as I always say to students, those people who plan better will succeed better in the exam. And the reason for that is that a plan can give you a really clear line of argument. You'll probably start off by splurging your ideas, and then you'll be able to refine it, make sure they're in the right order, and so on. So what I'm going to do in my plan is focus really on several aspects of tragedy, thinking about the extract and maybe having a couple of references to the rest of the play to show how we can situate that extract within the whole text. So in my first aspect of tragedy, I'm going to start with Desdemona. I think that's probably going to be my strongest point, and I'm going to think about how Shakespeare is building pathos for the tragic victim. You can see there I'm using buzzwords about aspects of tragedy, which are really closely linked in with this extract. My example I'm going to focus on for that is the use of the Willow Song. And then if I wanted to range more widely around the play, I might think about the section in Act 4 where he strikes Desdemona, and also the staging of the murder in 5.2. Now, what I don't want to do is write too much about those other sections of the play. However, because they bookend the scene that we're watching or that we're writing about, it's quite useful to think about where we're coming from and where we're going to. So when I'm selecting the other references that I'm making, there's a really clear rationale and a reason behind why I'm doing that, and I'm going to be able to link that in really clearly to my argument. Okay, the next thing I'm going to think of is probably got more that I can say about Desdemona in this scene. So I'm going to think about emphasising the tragic victim's innocence. After all, that is the primary function of this scene. So here, thinking about Desdemona's disbelief that women have affairs. And then I might contrast this transformation from the outspoken woman in Act 1 and Act 2. Okay, but again, not going to dwell too much on that other section of the play, but use it to contextualise what's happening in this particular scene. Finally, my third aspect of tragedy, I'm going to think about the use of this subplot. to highlight Desdemona's plight. Think about how Amelia provides commentary on unfair judgments of women and inequality. And then if I do have time, thinking about maybe the disempowerment of women and Shakespeare's presentation of female solidarity. So thinking now about the relationship between Desdemona and Amelia in this scene. Keeping my plan nice and short, using those buzzwords, not writing out reams and reams of quotations, but focusing on ideas, because ideas are what needs to drive those essays if you want to be in Band 5. And also, I'm just going to go back and check that I've got my ideas in a reasonable sequence, that the order will make sense and it will flow logically. So I'm starting with the tragic victim, then second paragraph, tragic victim, then moving on to Amelia. So I think that sequence works quite well. On to the introduction then. And my introductions always have 3 sentences. And for this question, we are contextualizing the extract, identifying aspects of tragedy or answering the question, and conceptualizing. Those are 3 stages that you can learn, and you can learn these sentence starters so that when you go into the exam and you've got that fear of the blank page, you know what you're going to write, you know how you're going to start, and you can get over that anxiety. So first of all, we're going to contextualize the extract, and we're going to say in this extract from the falling action. Remember, we have the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the denouement. So we're in the falling action here. So in this extract from the falling action, Shakespeare dramatizes a crucial stage in the stories of Desdemona and Amelia. Whilst Desdemona is presented as increasingly submissive and distressed, Amelia is finding her voice and her confidence as she articulates frustration at the physical and emotional mistreatment of women by their husbands. Okay, so I've told a little bit of the story about what's happening with these 2 women, explained where we are in their journey. Now we're going to identify some aspects of tragedy, or we're going to answer the question. The question is asking us to link the extract in with the tragedy of the play as a whole. So I'm going to say throughout this scene, we see how Shakespeare is emphasising the innocence of the tragic victim, building pathos for her, as he prepares the audience for the murder in Act 5, Scene 2. Yep, okay. And then I'm going to conceptualize, and conceptualize means basically looking at the big ideas. What is Shakespeare trying to communicate to us? Because yes, this is a play about the characters of Othello and Desdemona and Amelia and Iago, but actually every single text is an example of something that we need to learn about our own lives, about society. Every single text is a writer saying to the reader or to the audience, look, this is something that we need to change. This is something that we need to address or understand. So we're going to look at those big ideas. So in presenting these female characters in this way, it is possible that Shakespeare, and then I've put 3 options for verbs here. I'm going to go with critiquing. So it's possible that Shakespeare is critiquing the treatment and stereotyping of women in Renaissance society, revealing how they are victims of men's control. I'm just going to take the yellow bits out because obviously in the exam you won't have these. You'll write this all as one paragraph, but you'll have those yellow bits in your head as a guide for what you need to include in your introduction. Now that we've written the introduction, we need to write the main body of the essay. I would expect a really strong A-level essay to have 4 or 5 really well developed paragraphs. I know that I planned for 3 in my introduction, but you might find as you're writing that those are going to be spilling over, becoming bigger, and that they need to be split. So 4 or 5 paragraphs for the main body. Now, lots of teachers use acronyms and different ways of helping students to remember what to include in a paragraph. Use whichever one your teacher has taught you. So some schools, for example, use what, how, why, or point, evidence, explain, analyse. Use whatever method your teacher has taught you because basically they're all more or less the same. Now, in this paragraph, I'm going to be focusing on my first aspect of tragedy, building pathos for the tragic film, focusing on the Willow song. And I'm going to start by just signposting my reader so that they know which bit of the extract I'm talking about. So as this scene begins, it is immediately clear that Shakespeare is building the pathos the audience feels for the tragic victim. Desdemona is presented as being increasingly vulnerable as she prepares for bed within a bedchamber that has become more of a trap than a sanctuary. Now, it's really important to notice here that I'm making sure that I'm writing about the play as a construct. One of the main mistakes that we see students making is that they start to write about the characters as if they're real people and they go inside the text as if it's a true story. Remember, the text is a construct. It is something that Shakespeare is shaping, that the audience receives, that directors have changed over the centuries. So make sure you write about it as a construct. And you can do that by making sure you use the author's name, and also by using phrases such as Desdemona is presented, Emilia is portrayed. All of those things which you've learned at GCSE, but which you might be forgetting now that you're doing your A-levels. I'm going to start by writing about the staging of the scene. Don't forget that that's important, as well as the language. So it's notable that Shakespeare has not shown Desdemona and Othello alone in their bedchamber in previous scenes, although we do see them exiting the room in Act 2, Scene 3. And so the fact that we now see Emilia and Desdemona in this situation highlights the distance between the tragic hero and victim, as well as the importance of female friendship and solidarity. Okay, now what you'll see that I've done here is dropped in a little reference to Act 2, Scene 3. I've not talked about it too much, I've not overdone this, but I have shown the examiner that I'm confident in navigating the whole play, and I'm able to pick up on motifs and patterns that we see across the text. So if, as I said earlier when we were planning, if I was running out of time and not able to write about the whole text in as much depth as I wanted to, I have still shown some mastery of that as I've been writing. Okay, I'm now going to embed a quotation from the scene, and I'm going to do that by telling a little snippet of the story and then using the quotation to finish this off. So I'm going to write, as she prepares for sleep, Desdemona plaintively sings, "Willow, willow, willow, if I court more women, you'll couch with more men." Okay, so what you can see here is I've used the word as to start my sentence. That's normally the easiest way to do this. And then I've just put that quotation in smoothly into my sentence. That means I don't need clunky phrases like a quotation to show this is, or we see this in the line. Of course, if you're just stuck in the exam, don't waste time. Just put a quotation to show this is, that's fine. But this is a more sophisticated way of doing it. Now I'm going to start to unpeel the layers of the language here, really getting under the skin of the play. And I'm going to talk about the emotive song, which is juxtaposed with the drunken, another reference to earlier in the play, with the drunken singing earlier in the play, indicating just how far we have come since the celebrations of the marriage and the defeat of Cyprus in Act 2. Instead of being accompanied by laughter, this solo song evokes sorrow and despair, as the willow is a symbol of grief at unrequited love. If you look at what I'm saying, I'm not, breaking down the quotation and looking at each word individually and saying this word connotes this and this word connotes this and this word suggests this. But what I am doing is learning those words from our GCSE course and using them, embedding them much more fluently in my analysis. So we have the emotive song, which is juxtaposed with earlier in the play. We have the idea of this song evoking sorrow and despair, that it's a symbol. So I'm showing really good understanding of how to analyse the text, but I'm doing this in a more sophisticated way than we maybe did at GCSE. So what am I going to say next? Okay, so however, Shakespeare also uses this song as a symbol of female friendship later in the play, as Amelia sings it on her deathbed after realising Iago's true malevolence. Both women are united in their victimhood. Okay, a few spelling mistakes in there. Another link to the rest of the play, but what you'll notice is that I'm running a bit of a risk of starting to talk about these characters as if they're real people. Amelia sings it on her deathbed. Iago is truly malevolent. The women are united. So that's not too dangerous, but I need to make sure that I get Shakespeare's methods and his ideas back in as soon as I can. So moving on, perhaps one of the main reasons why this friendship is strengthened is the experience both women have of physical and emotional control at the hands of their husbands. Right, sailing into really dangerous territory here. The ideas are good, but I am focusing on these characters as if they're real and as if they are making their own decisions. So I need to get Shakespeare back in as soon as I can. I don't need to change what I've written, but I just need to tweak my direction slightly. So in 4.1, let's get Shakespeare in here. Shakespeare presents Othello striking Desdemona in public, whilst in this extract from 4.3, Amelia speaks generally of how husbands strike us. Zooming in on that quotation then, so the plural pronoun us suggests that this is a common occurrence for many women. Thus, it is arguable that Shakespeare, getting Shakespeare in, character's not real, the play is a construct, so thus it is arguable that Shakespeare is not just eliciting pathos for Desdemona, but that he is doing so to reveal the unjust treatment of women and to critique the morality of a society which will allow this to happen. And what you can see I'm doing here in my final sentence is zooming out a little bit, looking at the big ideas in the text, so not focusing just at word level, but oscillating between word level analysis, analysis of staging, analysis of the structure of the play, as well as those big ideas and those key concepts in the text. And finally, we're going to write our conclusion. Like the introduction, the conclusion can be short and sweet, but you've got to make sure you do two things. Firstly, answer the question. Do this assertively. Our introductions can often be quite tentative, suggesting it is possible, it is arguable that, but our conclusions need to be assertive, giving the answer to the question. And we need to conceptualize as well, so to look at that big picture. So to do the first bit, answer the question, we need to think about what the question was asking us to do. And it asked us to explore the scene in relation to the tragedy of the play as a whole. So we need to refer to aspects of tragedy in this sentence. So ultimately, Shakespeare uses this scene to heighten the pathos and sympathy we feel for the tragic victims of Othello's anger and Iago's lust for power, meaning that the foreshadowing of Desdemona's death in Act 5 is held in tension with the audience's desire for her survival. Okay, so I've talked about those aspects of tragedy. I've got pathos, I've got tragic victim in there, got foreshadowing in there as well, and I'm also talking about the structure of the play and the function that this scene has within that structure. Now, conceptualizing. You may want to kind of prepare some stock phrases beforehand, and you can look at the resources on my blog for this. I think there's some on my knowledge organizer. So if you're watching this on YouTube, go to amysmithliterature.wordpress.com and go down to the bottom of the page and you will find that resource. So it is clear that Shakespeare is, I'm going to change that to presenting the female characters in this way to highlight the evil that humankind is capable of, as well as to critique the unfair treatment of women within Renaissance society. Okay, just delete the yellow sections because of course you won't have those in the exam, but you might want to have those in your head so that you know where your essay is heading. So thank you very much, everybody. That is a wrap for this video. Make sure you check out the other resources on amysmithliterature.com. And if you want to, you can look at my new book, which is a quotation bank guide to Othello. Thank you and goodbye.